By my clock, it's 2:31, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. This is Dewvall from Network Kansas, and I want to thank you all for making time to join me this afternoon to talk a little bit about youth entrepreneurship. Just real quick, a couple housekeeping things. Like I mentioned, we've got a number of people joining us on this call, and I'm so appreciative of that. But it'll be really difficult to hear if we don't all keep our lines muted for now. *6 will mute you. If later in the call you need to speak, #6 will unmute you. In the meantime, I also wanted to offer the opportunity during the call, if you think of any questions that you didn't have a chance to email me prior to the call, you can send those to me by email at adewvall@gmail.com. You should all have my email. I think you probably had to have responded to it to be on this call, but that's adewvall@gmail.com. So you can send me those questions, and I'll do my best to answer them at the end of the call. I also wanted to make sure to let everyone know that the documents that I'm going to reference today on this call, you should already have. Your e-community, your regional e-community person probably provided them to you, but I will be sending those out again after the call. So if you think you may not have something, don't worry, you'll get it. All right, so that's kind of our housekeeping. For the beep I just heard, just reminding everybody to press *6 to mute your lines for this portion of the call. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about what it means to host a local entrepreneurship fair or competition. We're also going to hear from Janet Miller, the Cherokee County Economic Development Director, who hosted her first local entrepreneurship competition last year, rolling into a successful year 2. She's going to share with you a little bit about her experience. And then we're going to briefly touch on our current plans for the state competition at K-State and answer the questions I've received so far. I was mentioning for those that joined us late, if you think of any questions you would like answered that you have not submitted, you may email those to me during the call. I'll try to get to those at the end. And if I don't get to them at the end, I will answer them for you personally later. It's our hope that by the end of the call, you'll have a better idea about whether or not you want to try hosting a local entrepreneurship competition this year in your community, whether that's a city, a county, or just even an individual school. And we also hope that you'll see from Janet's experience that this is very doable. It's something that I think each of you could do if you choose to. We're really excited to see those efforts across the state. Then after the call, I encourage you to get in touch with your regional e-community representative and discuss the next steps, whether you're wanting to work on something or wanting to maybe think even farther down the line for next year. They'll be ready to assist you. So first of all, I wanted to provide you a little bit of background on what the Youth Entrepreneurship Challenge Series is and what we feel like a local e-fair, for short, looks like. Over the past couple of years, during 2014 and 2015, Network Kansas e-communities held a total of 16 local-level youth entrepreneurship competitions. Those competitions culminated in regional youth entrepreneurship competitions that we as Network Kansas hosted. In the first year, in 2014, we hosted one regional competition in Northwest Kansas, and last year we hosted 2 different regional competitions, one in Southeast Kansas and one in Northwest Kansas. We learned a lot, namely that we really shouldn't be hosting huge competitions ourselves. We felt like this was an opportunity to work with partners and create an opportunity for kids at the state level that would allow us to focus our resources on supporting the local entrepreneurship efforts. We feel like that's really where we saw the difference happening, are these local competitions, some of them very small, some of them grassroots. But it was amazing for us to see firsthand just how excited these events were getting kids about the idea of entrepreneurship, about, learning critical thinking skills and presentation skills and engaging sometimes with small business owners in the community who are mentoring them, and so we just really felt that what we wanted to do was help more communities host youth entrepreneurship events, and that's kind of how we arrived at the position we're at today. We went through a process with our board of directors to kind of shift the focus on this, allow e-communities to use loan funds to pay for youth entrepreneurship competitions that are part of our series, and really put a lot of effort into trying to help people develop them. So that's where we're at right now during this current academic year, the 2015-2016 year. Network Kansas e-communities, both existing e-communities and the new ones that are coming on board this fall, have the opportunity to host local level competitions, submit their event to be part of this Youth Entrepreneurship Challenge series that's going to culminate in a statewide competition. And then if they meet those guidelines and requirements, they'll be allowed to use e-community funds to pay for part or all of the competition. And so that's where we are as far as what the Youth Entrepreneurship Challenge series is. It's going to be essentially a series or a collection of all of these different local level events across the state, culminating in that one statewide event. A local e-fair, you'll hear those words a lot. We say local e-fair all the time. This can mean different things to different people, but essentially what we're talking about is some kind of a self-identified community group within the e-community. It could be across the entire community. For instance, it could be a countywide competition, or it could simply apply to a part of the community as long as it's inside the geographic bounds of that e-community. So that takes care of the local part. That's what I mean by local. And I should add that it could also be a partnership between multiple communities. But in any case, it would be the first sort of event that a student would be able to enter. And it would be very strongly connected to the community, be supported and organized at that sort of local bottom level. We also use the term e-fair quite a bit, simply because most of the events and competitions we see resemble like a science fair. So you've got that kind of fair or trade show component. It could be any type of an entrepreneurship competition, though. So local e-fair is what I mean by that. And these are locally organized events that bring students together for the purpose of having a hands-on entrepreneurship experience. This can be really simple. It could simply be students coming up with a business idea and presenting that plan to judges. In order to meet the requirements of a Network Kansas event, it has to have both a written component and an in-person oral component. Typically, we see people do some kind of a business plan or executive summary, and then some kind of a trade show with like a tabletop display where students are interviewed by judges and have both those components to the competition. The competition itself is usually a single-day event, usually not even an entire day, perhaps a couple hours of a day. Usually we see them held in a school during a school day. Often they're part of a class project or an extracurricular activity, and usually students have had some kind of education on the topic of a business plan or entrepreneurship. Sometimes this is delivered by a teacher. Sometimes an outside partner, like an economic development director, will visit the school and work with the students, perhaps during class time. Or other times there's been some arrangement made for out-of-class assistance, perhaps with small business owners who have agreed to mentor the students, or with other partners like the Kansas Small Business Development Center staff. But so there's some kind of education. The students then work together either in teams or individually to come up with some kind of a business idea, and then they have some sort of a written evidence of that idea and planning, and then they also are going to discuss it somehow out loud. So that's kind of at the simplest level what that means. And on the day of the competition, the students are judged usually by business owners, partners, other community members, and typically awards are then given to usually those students that place first, second, and third, and then often to reward other aspects of the business. We've seen awards for creative marketing, or for rural benefit, or for really being high-tech focused. Or sometimes the students have actually started the business, and so there might be distinctions given for people who are actually trying to run their idea as a business. A lot of this information is on a document that you should have received titled Network Kansas Entrepreneurship Community Youth Entrepreneurship Challenge Series Local Entrepreneurship Competitions. I go over an overview and some of these elements, as well as expectations, and there's some other ideas. So if you would like to see any of the things I just said in writing, they're on this document, and you'll also be receiving this later. But I just wanted to give you a brief overview of what that local e-fair looks like. So next I'm going to introduce Janet Miller, who I mentioned. She is the Economic Development Director in Cherokee County. And last year, she made the decision to go ahead and try doing this for the first time, and she's generously agreed to share with you a little bit of her experience so you can hear what it looks like kind of on the ground to try hosting a local e-fair.
Well, thanks, Ann. I'm glad to be here and happy to share our experiences. And I would say, first off, just if we can do it, anybody can do it. So, I think that we kind of got the idea in our minds early last fall, and we were able to pull off an e-fair, and it was a lot of fun. We learned a lot, but certainly it's a very doable proposition, so I would just throw that out there first. We did our first e-fair, as Ann said, last spring. We did it in the end of February. We elected, our e-community is actually at the county level, so we elected to do a county-wide e-fair. Our county actually includes 5 different school districts. 4 of the districts are wholly contained within our county, and the 5th district encompasses part of our county as well as part of a neighboring county. So we elected to include high school students from all 5 of those school districts, and we elected to basically sort of have a 3-part e-fair. We included tabletop displays, which Ann mentioned, so students created a display kind of highlighting and showcasing what their business idea was. They submitted a business plan, so they had that written component that they submitted ahead of time, and then they also did an elevator pitch to judges, so a 2 to 3 minute pitch, kind of highlighting what they wanted to do and kind of pitching that idea. So that was sort of the 3-part event. We ranked all 3 of those. We sort of weighted those, I guess, all 3 elements equally, and had scoring rubrics and that sort of thing. In terms of putting together the event, I think probably most important for us was really getting the schools to buy into the idea. That was kind of our biggest challenge. We had the idea, but without the schools' buy-in, we knew we weren't going to get very far. I started out by really reaching out to a superintendent at one of the districts that I'd worked with in the past and had a good relationship with, and just, called him and said, hey, we have an idea, and I really want to kind of talk to you and flesh it out. He was very gracious and said, let me pull together a meeting with, one of my principals at the high school and middle school level, and then also some teachers, and get some feedback. That was very helpful because I was able to hear from the school's perspective what their concerns were, in terms of was this something that the teachers felt was doable? How could it fit into the existing, sort of school curriculum, school day, so that this wasn't something extra that teachers were being asked to do. So I got a lot of good information from that in terms of, what time of day and what were the teachers already doing around business plans, so how it might fit in, and was able to use that information as I reached out to other districts. I will say that one thing I learned from working with the schools, and we're continuing to learn this year, is that you really need sort of a champion of some sort at each school district that you're going to try to include, and that champion may not be the same person or position in each district. In some of our districts, the principal or superintendent is really our champion, and they help kind of push that down to teachers. In others, we have a teacher that is really our champion. Some cases a business teacher, but other times it's been the ag teacher or, a technology teacher. So it kind of varies, and we're still learning who those champions are in a few of the districts, and sometimes it's multiple people in a district and sometimes it's one. So I would say getting the schools on board was really important. Otherwise, once we had the schools on board, it was really just a matter of putting the pieces in place, like you would for any event. So, what's the date going to be and what time and what are the logistics of that? Probably the other big few things that we worried about was we awarded cash prizes in our case, and so we spent some time working out those prizes and where we would get the funding for that. We elected to actually go out into the community and seek business sponsors to help cover the cost of those prizes versus, funding it entirely out of our e-community. And we had good success with that. We found that businesses really bought into this idea, especially, folks who started their businesses, kind of were entrepreneurs themselves and then grew their businesses. A lot of those folks really appreciated what we were trying to do. We, in fact, were so successful at fundraising that we ultimately had to turn away some donations at the end because we were at the point where we had so much funding for prizes. We were afraid we were going to have more to give away than at the regional competition, which we didn't want to do. So fundraising really went well for us, and, I would say that I think we found the community really embraced this idea and was very supportive. So that was a good thing. And then, the other sort of logistical thing was figuring out judges and then how to sort of provide them with information for how to, when they looked at a business plan, what factors were they rating, and how much weight to give those items. So we kind of came up with some scoring rubrics. And in our case, we used, some local bankers, some local young professionals. We pulled some people from the region that weren't from our county. So we had some folks who didn't know any of the students involved. And I would say one thing we learned was we did kind of a very quick, here's how we want you to judge the day of the competition. I would say we probably this year have learned that we need to be a little more, spend a little more time educating judges so that everybody's looking at the same factors. So that's one thing we learned last year. And, I think that otherwise most of the details were, little things, certificates or not, and what should they look like, and those sort of things, which I think everybody will figure out on their own. But the big things were really getting the schools on board, sponsors for prizes, judges, those sorts of things. And really for the first year, we learned a tremendous amount. After the event, we asked everybody who'd been involved, teachers, students, et cetera, hey, what did you like? What didn't you like? What could we do better? We got a tremendous amount of feedback, and we're going to be incorporating that into this year's event. So I think I'll leave it at that unless there's specific questions or if I missed anything, Ann, that you wanted me to cover initially.
I think you covered everything we discussed. Thank you, Janet.
Sure.
At the end, I think I may open it up in case anybody has a specific question for Janet. So please, if you have one, just hold it, and I'll give you a chance to unmute and ask that. So as Janet mentioned, they did their first event there last year, and it went really well. I was actually one of the judges, and so I can speak to how great it went. And that's one of the reasons I wanted you all to have the chance to hear from somebody who's done this. It worked. I know it can seem daunting, but it made it seem very, very possible for somebody to be able to get multiple schools working together, lots of students involved, great sponsors, and with, I'm hoping, not a huge amount of a time commitment. But real quickly, I wanted to discuss a little more about what it means for an entrepreneurship competition to be included in the Network Kansas YEC series, which is kind of why we're here today. Obviously, you guys could go and do anything you wanted on your own, and we would wholeheartedly support your efforts to work with the youth, bring them any kind of entrepreneurship inspiration. But if you want to host an e-fair that's part of this series, there are a couple of benefits that we think that you'll really enjoy. One of those is having all of this support. You've got a great regional person in your area who's really willing to support your efforts and help break down these steps into manageable chunks. But we also give you that option to use e-community funds to pay for the competition if you choose to. I'll second what Janet said. From what I've seen, it's really easy to get businesses involved and to support this with sponsorship dollars. But that being said, you don't have to, or you don't have to rely solely on that. And there are a number of costs that might be associated with a project like this. Typically, prize money, if you choose to offer it, is the biggest cost. We see communities offering anywhere from $500 total prize money up to about $3,000 total prize money. This can be distributed amongst multiple students. You could certainly do more if you had a big event. This is all up to you. But prize money is one. There will be some small expenses for things like certificates or whatever award you choose to hand out. It's possible that you'll incur some kind of a small expense for a venue. If you're hosting it at a school, you probably won't have that cost, but it's worth checking into. There's also possibly a cost for food if you choose to offer a meal during the competition. We know a number of people do this during lunch and maybe even have just something as simple as pizza brought in for the students, but that's still something to consider. And then finally, there are other things that you could do if you chose to, like advertising the event or paying for some kind of education, like books or I don't know, a video series or something like that. We also often see communities bring in a speaker, an inspirational speaker, usually an entrepreneur, maybe from that community, to talk to students. And usually, once again, the people who are asked are very glad to help. They're excited about the opportunity. But it's also possible that you may want to compensate somebody for doing something like that for you. So all of these costs associated with putting on one of these events are eligible to be paid for both out of those e-community marketing and admin funds that you're given to help foster entrepreneurship, as well as the e-community loan fund. And we know that you really take care of those loan funds and that you don't want to deplete them unnecessarily, but from what we've seen, this is an activity that makes a big difference in the community and often can be something that the e-community board feels strongly enough about to want to use loan funds. Another one of the benefits of having your local e-fair meet the guidelines to be a Network Kansas sanctioned event is the opportunity for students to compete at that state level competition. And I'll talk about that state competition here in just a moment, but I wanted to briefly touch on the requirements that an event has to meet in order to be sanctioned. Once again, I'm using a document right now that you hopefully all have seen, and if you have not, you'll be receiving it after this call. But these dates and requirements are all listed, so you can review these later. But the document is titled 2015-2016 Requirements and Important Dates. The requirements for a qualifying event, firstly, it must be located in an e-community. Really anywhere in the e-community is fine, but has to be within the bounds of whatever you filled out on your application initially. So like Janet mentioned, they're Cherokee County, so they held the event in Cherokee County, therefore it qualifies. Secondly, the competition must be open to students in one or more grades between 7th and 12th grades. You could include other students if you, for some reason, wanted to have like a all-school competition, or if you wanted to have high school and community college students compete together. But at least one of those grades must be represented, and that's because the students who will be eligible to compete at the state event are 7th to 12th grades. The majority, so just a simple majority, over 51% of students who participate in the competition must either reside in or attend school in a designated e-community. We know often the district boundaries don't necessarily follow the boundaries of your e-community, so a student can either live in the e-community or go to school there. But at least the majority have to live there. We have seen some really exciting partnerships between communities to do something together, where one community is an e-community and one community isn't, and that's going to be also just fine as long as more than half of the students are from that e-community. You can also have a competition that includes students from more than one e-community. The example that I've given is Wichita County and Greeley County host a joint event. Both counties are e-communities, and so therefore everybody is eligible because they all live in an e-community of some kind. At least one member of the e-community leadership team or financial review board must help organize or host the entrepreneurship competition. And basically that's just our way of saying we want this to be an e-community project. We want the e-community team to be involved. So even if a teacher or a school is taking a really active role with this, we want at least somebody off your team to be involved. And we think that's really important for future follow-up, too, to really help get the sort of economic development side of things even better integrated with the school system and lead to future opportunities there. Here's something that I mentioned earlier, but this is really important. The competition has to include a written component. It doesn't necessarily have to be scored and have that be a part of how the students are placed, but they have to do something written. It could be a business plan, a business description, an executive summary, anything like that. The state-level competition is going to use the K-State Executive Summary template, which hopefully has been provided to you, and if not, also will be provided to you after this call. So if you're looking for something to use, that would be a great one, because then students wouldn't have to do work twice. But you're welcome to use anything that works for you as long as it's written down. Then the competition must also include one or more in-person components, an elevator pitch, a trade show, some kind of an interview, a speech or a formal presentation, anything of that nature. As Janet mentioned, they actually use two of these components in their e-fair. They use an elevator pitch and a trade show, and so you're certainly welcome to combine things. The state competition will use an elevator pitch and a formal presentation. So you've got your pick, but you must have a written component and an in-person oral component. And then kind of on the important dates side of things, we have a form where you answer all of these questions about your e-fair and does it meet all of these requirements, called a sanction form, and you must submit that to Network Kansas by December 31st. And we have a PDF of that form, so you can work through it question by question and think through kind of planning your event. It's going to ask things about the date and who's involved in planning it. But we have an online form that we can send you the link to complete and have that taken care of. Once you turn that in, we will review it and make sure that it meets the requirements. And if it does, we're going to turn back around and issue you a sanction form. So you'll know that your event is officially part of this series. You'll know that you're able to use your loan funds, and we'll be ready to help support you with additional things like offering assistance with judging and other planning aspects. The competition itself has to take place between September 1st of this year, so already behind us, and April 1st of 2016 in order to qualify. So April 1st is kind of the important one to remember. As long as it happens before that, it can qualify. But within a week of that deadline, there are a number of things that start happening for students that would qualify to advance to the state competition, culminating in the state competition itself being held at the K-State Alumni Center on April 25th, 2016. I'll talk briefly about the state competition because I know that's what a lot of you want to hear about. But I do want to include the caveat that this is still early in the planning stages. I don't have a lot of details to share yet, other than to say we know it's going to be a fantastic day, and we're working very closely with K-State on making sure of that. And as we have more details, we will share them with you. A lot of the final sort of determinations aren't going to be made until after that December 31st deadline. We need to know who's participating, how many communities, how many students. So we're going to sit down kind of in January and really hammer out any of the remaining details. But I'm happy to share what we have decided so far, what we're aware of. The structure of the competition itself, like I mentioned, is going to start with an elevator pitch competition. If you have teams of students instead of individual students, the team will select just one team member to give a 2-minute elevator pitch of their idea. The elevator pitch competition is going to be judged separately from the rest of the competition, so students will have the opportunity to win prizes just for pitching. Likewise, if students aren't great at elevator pitches, they can still do well in the more formal part of the competition. So that's a 2-minute pitch. The first round is going to have each business, either the team or the individual, give a 5-minute presentation about their business idea with 10 minutes of Q&A with the judges. So it'll be a total of 15 minutes. That's scored. 5-minute presentation and 10-minute Q&A. As far as we know at the moment, PowerPoint or visual aids would be completely acceptable during that 5-minute presentation. None of those kinds of things would be permitted during the elevator pitch, but if students wanted to work on things for their presentation, then you could encourage them in that direction. After that first round in the morning, I'm going to have a keynote luncheon where we'll have some kind of a great inspirational speaker and give students a chance to kind of decompress after the morning and move on after lunch to the final round where the top students from round 1 will give the same presentation, that 5-minute presentation with 10 minutes Q&A with the judges in front of the entire audience. The morning is going to be private, closed-door rooms with the best students advancing and then giving their presentations in front of everybody in the afternoon. And then the judges will select the winners, and we'll have that announcement that afternoon. So it'll be a full day. We'll be giving away more than $10,000 in prizes, including prizes specifically for e-community participants. One of the exciting things about the state competition is that it's going to include students from other parts of the state as well, outside of Network Kansas. The Youth Entrepreneurs Organization, YE, sends their best students. Last year they also had a couple other partners participate and send students. We're still finalizing that, but it'll be a great chance to truly have a statewide competition for the best of the best out of youth entrepreneurship across Kansas. We have a news release on our website with a little more information about this, and I'll include that link in the email I send out in case you haven't had a chance to see that. I'm going to go ahead and move on to a little bit of Q&A. I've received a few general questions that I'll cover, and then I'm going to turn to my colleague Simone Elder, who works in Western Kansas with the e-communities, to have her share her thoughts on a few of the more specific questions about organizing events. And at that time, I'll go ahead and open it up if anybody wants to unmute and ask live questions. So real quickly, I'll cover the questions that I have received so far. I'm just checking my email box in case I received any. Let's see. Okay, it looks like most of the questions I got were about that K-State competition. I think I covered what the formal presentation looks like, that 5-minute presentation. That was one of the questions. And we also will be sharing scoring criteria as we develop it for that state competition. In that packet that I referenced earlier, we've included samples of different scoring sheets. We've included a couple samples of scoring sheets that we used as Network Kansas at the regional events in the past 2 years for judging the trade show portion and the elevator pitch. I don't have K-State's elevator pitch or formal presentation score sheet, but I did include the score sheet for the executive summary. So you can reference that because I do know it's important to know what the student's going to be judged on. But that should give you a little bit of an idea of some of the components that are important. And generally speaking, I would refer to that K-State executive summary template because the idea behind having them complete that template is to start to organize their thoughts about the important aspects of their business. And so, those are going to be some of the things that they're judged on. I also received a question says, so if a business, either a student or a team of students, gets sent to state, but the state can deny them based off their executive summary, essentially they may not end up sending a student to state. That's a question. And that question is referring to the fact that students who would advance to the state competition will submit an executive summary as a qualifier. The executive summary itself won't be scored, and it may not even get used. But in the event that there are more students participating and trying to earn a spot at state than there are spots at state, that executive summary will be used as a screening round. So it's there if we need it. But more importantly, it's also designed just to help the student refine their business idea and be able to succinctly explain it, which is important to both the pitch and the presentation. But yeah, in theory, if we have a lot of students qualify and apply to advance to state, then some of them will be denied based on the quality of their executive summary. So it is important to do well with that. We also received a few, hold on, there's one more, and it is important. Can each community only send one student, regardless of number of school districts participating? It's a good question, and one we've received a lot, which is basically, how do the students get to state? This is one of those questions that we don't have figured out yet. It's largely dependent on the number of events that end up being held. What I can tell you is at the moment, what we are thinking is that each e-community that participates will get at least one student. We also want to try to permit additional students in situations where there are large school districts or large events with a lot of students competing. And we also want to make sure that whatever method we use is fair. We hadn't anticipated when we started this planning process that so many e-communities this year were going to want to partner and work together on hosting events. So we'd started out saying each e-community gets one student, but now we're having to evolve that. So I can tell you each e-community gets at least one student, maybe more. We will see. And that's something else that we won't know until January, but that as soon as we know it, we will tell you. All right, so we got a couple more specific questions related to hosting an event, and I'm going to turn the call over to my colleague Simone. Like I mentioned, Simone works in western Kansas with our e-communities out there. She's seen firsthand a number of e-fairs and has been involved in all aspects, from competing as a student years ago to helping run one and then now helping judge and help others host them. So she's going to give you her thoughts. Simone?
All right. One of the specific questions that we got was for first, second, and third, we'll be presenting the winners just a few hours after the end of judging. How have others organized their judging, scorecards, criteria used, etc.? As Anne mentioned, there is a larger document that has some sample of different judging sheets. I included the judging sheet for the local competition that we used in Wichita County, the past couple of years. And so you're welcome to take a look at that. Some of the criteria that's on that, giving them a very simple score for the business plan, evaluating the marketing plan, the financial feasibility, also looking at their presentation, the product feasibility, and then any R&D, research and development that had been done prior to the competition. Another thing that we've judged on, and this is, like I said, just an example, but looking at the commitment to the rural lifestyle. That might be something else that you may take into consideration when organizing the judging. In regards to the part about noting only a few hours, typically people tally them up real quick. I just was a judge for the Next Tech business plan competition last week, and they had a Excel spreadsheet plugged in, so you could easily plug in the numbers and tally and get a quicker result on who the winners were. Oftentimes that judging or the tallying of scores takes place during a speaker, so you may consider that if you are having a speaker for your event, working it in so you have the judges for a couple hours and then the speaker takes place and then presentation of awards after that. Another specific question asked about a People's Choice Award, and how that's handled. A lot of times it's just write down the name on the ballot, but in thinking how to effectively count up or efficiently count up those votes, a couple of other suggestions that I would make is maybe numbering the students 1 through 14 or 15. So all people have to do is write a number on the sheet instead of the name of the business, and voting that way. Your People's Choice Award could also be a focused award. Maybe instead of just for the best people's or best business based on People's Choice, it could be focused on marketing or booth presentation. Those are just a couple of examples that I would suggest for that. And again, that tallying could take place during the speaker really quickly at the end. And then the final question, have others had a mix of both existing businesses and ideas? How difficult is it to judge an existing business when compared to an idea? In a lot of the competitions I've seen here in Kansas, this doesn't happen very often, but I've had some experience with youth entrepreneurship fairs in Texas and Colorado, and a lot of times they actually have two separate sets of prizes. They have one for an existing business, and then they also have one for a concept business. Of course, you may not be able to determine how many of each you're going to have until you're asking for applications and business plans or executive summaries a couple weeks beforehand. but then they divide those prizes out into first, second, third for concept and first, second, third for existing. However, if you only have one or two existing businesses and the rest are concepts, one suggestion I might make in judging fairly might be looking at what kinds of plans does the existing business have for growth in the future. Obviously, their financials will be a little bit better, but coaching the judges to look, how are they looking to grow this business or implement new ideas into what is being done. So I think that hopefully that answers those three specific questions. I'll turn it back over to you, Anne.
Thank you, Simone. We've got a few minutes left. I'm going to give this a try. First of all, a couple things in case things get out of hand and you can never hear me again. I just wanted to say at the end of the call, as a reminder, I'll be sending out the documents that I referred and a link to that news release. I also have recorded this call, and I will be sending that out to you as well so that if it was helpful, you can share that with other members of your team or maybe teachers or the school district. So I'll be making that available as well. And as always, if you think of other questions, you can contact me directly, or you're welcome to reach out directly to your regional e-community person. I know they're ready and excited to help you with anything related to youth entrepreneurship. It's a big interest for us here at Network Kansas. It's probably the most difficult and most fun part of my job, and so I can't emphasize enough how much we really do want to help support your efforts. So we're going to try this experiment here in just a moment. If you have questions, you can unmute your line by pressing #6. I would ask that if you have a specific question for Janet or Simone or me, please just say our name first and then state your question, and the appropriate person will respond. So we'll give this a try until about 3:30, and then we'll wrap up. So if anybody has questions, you can unmute now.
Hi, I actually have a question for Janet, and this is Sierra. I wanted to know, how did you get the businesses involved exactly? You said you had more sponsorship than you needed. Did you go to them directly? Did you mail them? Did you provide options? Or how did you do that?
The way we handled that, we actually we basically identified about 25 or 30 businesses in the county that we felt were either entrepreneurial in nature, or we knew from interactions with them, we felt like they would have an interest in what we were doing. We actually, kind of prepared a sort of a document that was kind of sponsorship level. So we gave people options. We gave somebody, do you want to be our first prize sponsor? That's, $1,000. Do you want to be our second prize sponsor? $500. Do you want to be our third prize sponsor? And then we also gave kind of a supporter level where folks could, give $100 or something to be a supporter. And then we did a letter. We sent that letter out to those 30 businesses. We were expecting to need to do personal visits and follow-up calls. Actually, we didn't need to. Checks started flowing in immediately, and we never ended up having to go back and do any follow-up. But that's how we approached it.
Cool. Thanks.
Any other questions? All right, I'm going to wait another couple seconds just in case anything pops into your mind. All right. Well, I'm going to assume that we have satisfied everyone's curiosity, and so there are no more questions. So we'll go ahead and wrap up this call. I want to thank especially Janet Miller for sharing her time and expertise with us today, as well as Simone Elder for the same. And I appreciate all of your time. I know it's not easy to find an hour, especially during a holiday week, to sit down and listen to a phone call. So I very much appreciate that as well. Just reiterate that Network Kansas is here and ready to help with any of your questions or ideas. So reach out to any of us at any time. We'll be following up after this call with an email, and so please look for that. And like I said, if there's no other questions, then I suppose I'll just wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving and look forward to hearing from you soon. All right, thanks, everybody. Is anyone else still on?
The leader has disconnected. The conference will now end.